Well, hey friends, do I have a fun treat for you today? So, today you are going to get an inside look at an abortion recovery breakthrough call. This client of mine was so gracious in allowing her session to be shared. And so that does not happen a lot. And so definitely take advantage of listening to this. This call happened a little more recently. And so I'm really excited for you to get to hear what a call like this is like, because sometimes we want to know what we're getting before we commit to it, right? And so you may be thinking like, oh, I want to commit to trying this coaching thing for my healing, but what do I even expect? Like, what happens when we talk to each other? And so that's what you get today. And the reason why I'm doing that today and letting you kind of have this inside sneak peek is because right now, so as this episode comes out until tomorrow, so Friday, May 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Central Time, you can get just over 20% off coaching with me. So whether you want a single session or whether you want a package of sessions, those options are just over 20% off only for a limited time. So listen in, glean in, just kind of hear how this works. And remember that every single session is tailored to you, which is what I love about coaching. There are so many different ways to heal. And I believe coaching is such a great complement to other ways. So if you are listening to this and you've been through abortion recovery programs, coaching still can be for you, because we need to reframe how we look at healing. Sometimes we think, oh, I'll go through this and I'll be healed. I don't think we're ever fully healed on this side of heaven. We live in a fallen and broken world, and we are just going to be experiencing hard things and tragedies until we are in eternity with Jesus. This is the sin consequence that we are experiencing. And so coaching can really help us, because we are going to have stuck points on our healing journey. We are grieving. Grief doesn't just go away. And so I want you to reframe your mind around that. There's no quick fix. There's no quick healing band-aid. It's a journey. And so regardless of where you're at, maybe you have done zero healing work. This is for you. Maybe you've done some. This can still be for you. It's tailored individually to you, which is why I love it. We don't follow some program that was developed for only one kind of person. We look at you and your situation and your circumstances and what you say your biggest struggle is and what you say your most desired outcome is. And so anyway, I'm going to stop yammering your ear off. But if that interests you, if you want to do that, I want you to go right now to brittanypoppy.com/May sale, and you can get your coaching spot snagged over there. All the information you need is on that page, and then the options for you are there so that you can book your spot and get on the calendar and we can start working together. So without further ado, here is my session with my beautiful client, whose name I will omit out of respect for my clients who do decide that they have their episodes aired. I have decided to no longer put any identifiable information about them. So anyone who has done that, just disclaimer, they have given me permission to do that, but going forward, it's going to be anonymous. I want you to feel fully confident that I am going to uphold that confidentiality agreement. So without further ado, here is an inside sneak peek at an abortion recovery breakthrough call. If you're tired of living with shame and guilt and want simple steps to heal, find peace, and feel less alone after abortion, you are in the right place. Hey, I'm Brittany, wife, homeschooling mom of 2, abortion recovery coach, and pro-life speaker. I learned the secret of how to find healing and redemption from my past. Spoiler alert, it's Jesus. If you're ready for tactical post-abortion healing tips, biblical truth, and strategies for grieving forward, then this podcast is for you. Let's crack open that Bible and get ready to receive the good news. what kinds of things do you feel like you're struggling with as you kind of peel back these layers? Like, what kinds of things do you get stuck on? Because I know you said you're going through surrendering the secret. You're going through that right now?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, my biggest well, I struggle with just shame and
Mm-hmm.
forgiving myself. And I think it was in Surrendering the Secret. It said something like, for me not to forgive my or for me not to forgive myself is like it had something to do with God and his forgiveness. Just if he's going to forgive you, then you have to forgive yourself. The book's right here. I just want to look. I thought it made such sense to me
Yeah.
because forgiving yourself it's a daily struggle, I feel.
Oh,
For
yeah.
me it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's every day I have to wake up and, remind myself, if God can forgive me, I have to be able to learn to forgive myself. But I don't know that I can find that right now. But so forgiveness is definitely on and shame and guilt. Um, I feel like it's affected my intimate life with my husband a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
just because I don't feel like maybe I deserve a healthy sex life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's probably normal just from all the stuff I've been reading. You just don't feel like are deserving of that because of your choices that you made.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the anxiety, I don't really know what that stems from. It's just my body's way of dealing with stuff that I've suppressed, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's my biggest issues.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, anxiety is really kind of a beast because there's no like one size fits all way of healing that. And
Hmm.
sometimes too, it's more so like we have to find what works for us to cope with those feelings because it's almost like, especially when we've been through trauma, you've been diagnosed with PTSD. That's a very real thing. Our body is almost kind of in fight or flight mode all the time. And we can't even always be prepared for what might trigger us into those feelings of anxiety or do you find that uh does your anxiety kind of manifest itself in like panic or what does that look like for you?
Um, I'd say when I first started with my panic attacks back in the 90s, it was more like panic attacks that I was
Mm-hmm.
having. Um, but as I've gotten older and my body has, my brain, then I know what it is, and I know how to control it. I don't have the panic attacks per se as much, but I have just crazy nervousness and the mind, will ruminate on different thoughts, in that cycle is really hard to break once you get into that, like
Oh yeah.
negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm learning to combat those thoughts as soon as they come into my mind with positive ones and, um, a lot of prayer and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good tactic to just it's like what you said about meditation, kind of you meditate on the good to try to cancel out the bad as much as possible and it can kind of help you breathe a little easier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm also into, God is of course my strength. He's my strength, but I think he gives us these different like things to use, because that's what he does. So I'm using this heart math coherent type of thing. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's where your heart and your brain and your nervous system all kind of work together. And it's basically just through deep breathing, light and caring and feelings of forgiveness and empathy, and then breathing out the negative. And I've
Yeah.
never really been into like all of that, spiritual stuff, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I know God is where the strength is, but um, so when I breathe in, I'll breathe in, God loves me,
Yeah.
I'll breathe in all the positivity things that relate with him. Um, and then blow out the negative. And it's pretty interesting. It's like a monitor that watches your heart rate and your brain heart rate. And when they sync together, it's a nice smooth up and down pattern. But when they're not syncing, it's more of a jagged um, pattern. And it's crazy to think that your brain is that strong that it can
Mm,
affect your that they can combine with your heart. I don't even understand how it works completely, but I know that it's definitely studies show that it's because of the deep breathing and that will really help calm your nervous system. So
mm-hmm.
there's just so many things that have just been eye-opening to me. So I think that might be helping too with my panic attacks as well, just learning how to get through them, not letting it get to that point where it's a panic attack.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. That's really interesting. And yeah, I think too, God gives us tools like that. He's not against us using the tools that he's given us. I think our breath is a tool that he's given us. Obviously it sustains our life and we can use it as a tool to, help with our inner healing. I saw a thing. I don't know how incredibly true this is, but I thought it was really interesting that when you look at Yahweh in its original form, it actually didn't have any vowels. And if you were to pronounce it, it's actually like a breath, like breathing in and out. And so it's
I've
almost
heard
like
that.
we're saying God's name every breath we take. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, if you think about it. So it's the why and then the way. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
I did not explain it as
interesting.
eloquently as the post I read about
No,
it,
but
but
I understand. I can I've heard that somewhere. Yeah, I don't know. My friends and I have done a lot of Beth Moore Bible studies, and I might have been one of her Bible studies. I don't know. I get lost with all my information. I'm information overload lately.
oh
So
yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
I'm still trying to find this piece in that book that just made me
Yeah.
my eyes light up. Thought about God forgiving me and how I need to learn to forgive
Mm,
myself because he forgave me.
yeah.
I mean, I know
So
the Bible says that, but
yeah, well, it's one thing to know it, but it's another thing to believe it, right?
yes.
Yeah. Um, Tell me more about kind of forgiveness for you. Like, what does forgiveness look like for you in general? Do you struggle to forgive other people? Are there other things in your life that you struggle to forgive yourself for? Maybe just kind of give me a background on like forgiveness in your life in general.
Feel like I do forgive people for the most part, but it kind of depends on what that just sounds bad. It kind of depends on who it is and what the offense is, I mean, that's probably natural. But I try to like, I'll pray that, God help me forgive this person, take it from me, to help me to heal. But then it comes back into my mind and then the anger flares again. And then I have to step back and say, listen, that person or this person has their own issues they're trying to deal with. Um, and I try to give them some grace when it comes to that because, we all have struggles. Um, but I feel like generally I'm a forgiving person, but I just tend not to forget.
Mm-hmm.
And the forgetting is what I know you're not probably never will forget, but when I remember is when the anger flares again. And I have
Mm-hmm.
to continually remind myself to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of anger or unforgiveness towards my abortion. My shame is pretty much directed at me only. I wasn't forced into an abortion. My parents let me make that decision. Um, the father of my baby, uh, he was supportive at first. We were only 18. And then he questioned if it was his child. So I knew then he wasn't going to be supportive. And of course, it was his child because I had lost my virginity to him. Too, so I think at first I was a little angry and not forgiving of that. But, I have to remember that he was young too, and probably just as scared as I was. So, if he could get off the hook by saying, maybe it's not mine, it would help him deal with it better. So, yeah, I think just through maturity, I'm learning that forgiveness is good for my well-being, not to hang on to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you have that outlook. It sounds like you do have grace for people. And I think I agree with you exactly. When you said that sometimes it kind of depends on who it is or what it was. I think we're all like that. There are certain things that are harder to come to that place of forgiveness for, and that's totally natural. Uh, when something hurts, it's not, going to be an immediate, healing there. And I think sometimes too, we get really confused on what forgiveness actually is. Do you ever feel like forgiveness is kind of more of, well, let me ask you, what do you think forgiveness is? Like, do you have to have a certain feeling? Tell me kind of what your thoughts are when I ask you that question.
It's just not holding it against the person.
Yeah.
Um, that's what and this just as of lately is when I'm starting to have grace for people because
Yeah.
before this episode, I think God's teaching me that as well. Before this episode I had at the end of the year, I don't think I was so quick to forgive. I kind of hung on to anger and I thought about it a lot and I'm trying to get these stressors out of my life. So I have to forgive and let
Yeah.
go so I can move on.
Hmm.
And it's not always an easy task, especially because a lot of it has to do with family. So when you're surrounded by that, it's a constant reminder of that anger that you have, but to let it go is going to help me better in the long run. So I'm sorry, I forgot your question, but what was your question?
Yeah, no, that kind of answered it. So I was trying to ask more of like an open-ended, but what I was kind of wanting to hear from you is whether or not you feel like forgiveness is kind of a feeling or, and you answered that. I don't get the impression that you think that. But you don't correlate forgiveness with a feeling, correct?
I mean, sort of in a way, I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like if I had more forgiveness, I would have, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a tricky question. Do I feel like it's a feeling? I think it's a decision
Hmm.
you have to make, but then you have to continually reinforce like the feeling of forgiveness. Like I have to continually remind myself that I've given this to God and I can't change it and I need to forgive them so I can do better for myself. I need to let that go. But it's a feeling that arises so often that I have to continually remind myself. So I don't know. Is that a feeling or is that I don't know if that's a feeling or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it kind of can be. I think there are certain feelings that come with forgiveness, but one thing that and you'll learn more of this too when you kind of are going through the forgiven and set free, because there's a whole chapter on this. So I don't want to like spoil it for you, but um a lot of times we go into forgiveness having these preconceived notions of what forgiveness is. So we'll think, I have to feel a certain way about something in order for it to, like, for the forgiveness to be taking effect. Or you mentioned that you don't necessarily forget about things when you forgive them. And so often we think that we have to forget about something if we forgive it, or that we have to reconcile with a person that we forgive, or um that if we feel some sort of anger, if we think about that again, then we haven't forgiven the person. And sometimes those things can be true, but a majority of the time that's actually what you just said. Forgiveness is a decision. And so that doesn't mean that, like, say, you know for example, say my husband said something that hurt me or something. He didn't recently anyway, but let's just say he said something that I took offense to. Um, and he apologized and I chose to forgive him, or I chose to forgive him even if he didn't. That doesn't mean that 3 weeks later I'm not necessarily going to like that I might think about that again and I might feel sad about that again. But that doesn't mean that I haven't forgiven him. It just means that I thought about it and it was hurtful. I'm not sinning in having those feelings, but then my next thing to do is to decide, okay, but I'm not going to hold this against him because I love him and we all make mistakes and I've said something that hurt him before too. I don't know if any of this is resonating with you, but I think sometimes it's really easy for us to look at this for other people and go, okay, I can do that. I can do that. I can extend grace to someone else. And I can recognize that, I'm not always going to forget the things that they've done that's hurt me, but I can choose to treat them as a child of God and I can choose to not hold these things against them. But it's really hard to do when it's ourselves because we're so much harder on ourselves. But that's the thing. We have to come to a place where we are going to decide over and over again that when we forgive ourselves, which technically isn't really biblical, right? God doesn't say forgive yourself. He says we are to forgive others. But when it comes to forgiving ourselves, it's not about forgiving ourselves and deciding whether we can be forgiven. It's about accepting God has already forgiven me. It says multiple times throughout scripture, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us of that. So it's actually sinful to not accept it. And so we have to then have that constant renewing of our mind of, no, I'm not going to punish myself with feeling ashamed and guilty because I don't need to anymore. God provided Jesus, his son, to take on our sin and pay that price for us. And so my responsibility is to accept that God's forgiven me and continue to renew my mind and remind myself of that. I don't know if that resonates with you, but
Well, it does. It does. Yeah.
yeah.
And that was in the surrendering the secret, that was similar to what I was trying to find.
Yeah.
It was something to that matter that, if God's forgiven us, that's really all that matters.
Mhm.
Now we just need to be obedient and forgive ourselves.
Right.
And
Mhm.
it is challenging
It is.
because Satan likes to, be right there telling me, but that's a big sin. How could he forgive that?
Mhm.
But at least I'm aware that it is Satan, and I just have to continue on
Yeah.
trying, and trying. It's easy to say I forgive myself, but I want to feel that in myself. I
Right.
want to feel that's a feeling I want, a feeling of forgiveness. And I think that's just going to take time. And um, for so many years, I buried it and um, said that that was my only option. So I'm going to forget about it. But now I have to come to terms with what my choice was. And, after 38 years, it's buried pretty deep. So to
Yeah.
pull all that up again and just now starting to forgive myself, I think it's going to take some time.
Yeah, absolutely. God absolutely uses time to help us heal. And, I've worked with other women too who have, just kind of buried it or not thought about it. They did this when they were, teens or early 20s, and then they get to the point where, they're in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they've never thought about it again. And now all of a sudden, it's like they're right back. They're feeling decades of pain that they
Yeah.
never addressed once. And so it's kind of like the floodgates have opened and like it's like barreled them over and they have to,
Hmm.
okay, now I have to start. But thankfully, it doesn't have to take as much time as has passed for the healing to set in and begin and grow. Which is amazing how God can do that, in a shorter amount of time. And it doesn't mean that, it's overnight either. That's not what I'm saying. But it's, God can do so much in shorter amounts of time than we think that he can sometimes.
It makes me wish I would have, you know, done this a long time ago, and maybe I wouldn't have had those years. But everything's for a purpose. So,
Hmm.
you know, I had to go through what I went through to get to the point that I'm at, and that's how way God wanted it. So I just have to follow his lead. And
Yeah.
not that that's the way God wanted it, but that's the way it played out. And
Hmm.
through it all, I'm learning that, I'm learning from him, and he's making good things happen out of a bad situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yes, so good.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to the people that he's connected you with, I think, you know, you wouldn't have connected with them if you would have started this, 20 years
Oh, that's
ago.
true. That's true.
So, even though, yes, would that have been amazing if you would have had healing, sooner, there are certain people that you're connecting with that, maybe you're supposed to connect with them and maybe you
That's
were
true.
supposed to talk to them now.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago wouldn't have been possible. Yeah. Never
Yeah.
thought about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
You mentioned that you struggle with intimacy. Do you feel comfortable talking to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's just not something, and I always kind of blamed it on genetics because my mom said she was never really super intimate with my dad. It was more for just getting pregnant than anything,
Yeah.
not something that we enjoyed. And, it is a gift from God to, have a nice sex life. That's a gift he gives to us. But I guess because of my abortion, I never felt that gift, I was worthy of that gift. So, of course, when we first got married, it was wonderful, because it was new and, all that good stuff. But, then the babies came right after that. And then you get tied up with all that kind of stuff. And you can kind of blame it on, I'm just too busy with the kids. And then, um, just time goes on and you just get farther and farther away. I mean, we have a great relationship. He's always wanted more out of our intimate life than I did, and I feel some guilt from that too because so many years of his prime time, because we're both in our 50s and it's not really as strong as it was just because of your age. But those years that he was just wanting to have more intimacy, I kind of took that from him. So I'm kind of dealing with some issues of guilt that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that and actually can relate to that. Um And I think a lot of women who struggle with, the decision that we've both made can relate to that, but it's, abortion already isn't talked about or isn't talked about in the healing aspect enough. But certainly people aren't wanting to have conversations about sex and intimacy,
Right.
especially biblically, it's harder to find those conversations. But do you think that your abortion is like, do you think that was responsible for your, um, not uh desiring that or wanting that as much, like even when you were kind of burying that?
It's hard to tell. I never really thought about it. Um, Consciously thought you don't deserve to have a good sex life because of what you did, and this is just what you're going to have to live with. But as I've gotten older, I guess I've wondered if that is maybe why I never was, because it just hurt too bad to think about the abortion and just the crap that went along with it. Um, and just it would just be better just to not deal with any of that, just the whole sex thing in general. But it could be genetics as well. Maybe you just have, low libido. I don't know. Like I said, I think at first I used to just say, well, my mom was like that, so I'm probably going to be like that too. But then as the years have progressed, I just have wondered if maybe I'm punishing myself. But at the same token, I get to punish my husband as well, which that's the part that, he didn't do anything wrong, but I'm punishing him.
Mhm. Yeah.
where he
Yeah.
could have married someone else and had a wonderful sex life. Um, but he chose me, and he chose someone that had some issues that didn't allow me to, you know, be as intimate as he would have liked.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you two have conversations about that?
Yeah, we've talked about it. It's, with men, we don't get too into detail, but he stresses that he would like it more frequently to be intimate, but then as he's gotten older, he's not really wanting, feeling those feelings as much either. So um it doesn't come up as often. But I've apologized to him for that. But
Yeah.
I wish that I could have been better, and I'm still that I could be better about that. But he's just kind of learned to live with it. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good wife in other aspects. So I try to focus on that. And we're none of us are perfect. So, um, yeah, I don't think he holds it against me. He just maybe
Yeah.
wishes it could have been different.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we do talk about it, but just not into too much depth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially too, I think men tend to be, just in general less emotional and they don't necessarily need to talk on that deeper level where sometimes like that's helpful to us. But yeah, that's just how God created us differently and that's
Yeah.
okay. And yeah.
Yeah. We balance each other out. Like, so if we were both like me, whew, I don't know if that would be good. And then if we were both like him, we'd probably never talk about anything. So,
Yeah. Yes.
right.
Exactly. Yes.
So,
Yes, it's so funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
just a nice balance.
Yeah. So, I ask those questions because if you want them, and I know you said you're kind of on information overload, so I don't want to like overload you further with more things. But that's something that I've been working with some other women on, and even myself. Like I said, I actually like that's a really big struggle for me, even still in my healing. Um, and I've found some different resources that have kind of like helped reframe my thinking around that because I relate to what you said about how, I don't deserve this because of what I did. Um, I think a lot of women, there are some symptoms on the, post-abortion stress syndrome sheet that like, there's various things that women struggle with. And one of them is, issues with intimacy and lost a sense of femininity. Like we kind of have lost, I don't know if you relate to this feeling, but we've kind of lost our, feel like when we think about intimacy in particular and how the feminine aspect of that is, it's almost like we don't does feel like we deserve to be held or is that kind of relatable or making am I making any sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my feelings. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just don't feel like I deserve that because of choices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we almost have to kind of like retrain our brains and like we talked about renewing our minds earlier, we almost kind of have to retrain our brains and reteach ourselves like what intimacy is and why God made it beautiful. Not that we don't know what that is already, we have an understanding of that, but then we also have to kind of teach ourselves that it applies to us also. And so if you like to read, I have some recommendations for books that might be helpful.
Absolutely.
Or uh, some podcasts even that you might find helpful in
Love that.
that area. Okay. Yeah, so I'll say them if you want to write them down, but I'm actually my AI is taking notes of our conversation too, and I'll send all of those notes to you when we're done talking. So those
Okay.
should be in there also. Well, anything else that you kind of have on your mind that you'd like to talk about for the time that we have left?
Agree. I feel like God's working in me from the Bible studies that I've been doing, this surrendering the secret. So many women have come into it thinking that they were coming to the group so they could help mentor other women who have been going through pain of abortion. And they found that they are the ones that needed more help than they thought. So I through that, I'm thinking, wow, is this a door that God's opening for me, that maybe I could help someone someday?
Yeah.
So I know that I have to heal myself first,
Yeah.
and but it's exciting to think that because for years I've prayed, God, just show me what you want from me because like I said, I was raised in a Christian home. I went to a Baptist school. I've always gone to church. I've never felt like a huge shift in my life. And, I've went to, I've babysat the kids in the nursery and I've helped at children's church and I've, helped at, camp in the summer. I've done all those little things for church, but I've never felt like this fulfillment like that God has placed on me, like, a work that I would like to do. And who knows, where this would lead. But deep in my gut, I feel like it's God saying, yes, you heal yourself and then I'm going to keep opening doors and you just have to go through them. So I'm really hoping that that's where it's leading me.
Yeah, absolutely. Revelation 12:11 says that we overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I firmly believe that God uses our healing to help others in his kingdom. Even the Bible talks about how the gates of hell will not prevail. And I never thought so much about that until our pastor did a sermon about how gates aren't like people hear that and they think that hell is coming after us. But gates aren't meant to like come at you, they're meant to keep you out. And so we are storming the gates of hell and we are pulling people out of their sin and shame and showing them the love of Jesus. And the gates of hell are not going to prevail against us healing and sharing the gospel and helping others heal and find Christ. And so, when you say that, I have no doubts that God does have a plan for your healing. And if you're feeling a nudge that it's to help other people, I would definitely lean into that because, that healing foundation, especially with the things that you told me that you have lined up this year for that, that's going
Mhm.
to prepare you so much in how to help others. And in those groups, you're going to be helping other people. As you each are answering questions, we find so much healing in getting to hear others' experiences. So I think I'm excited to see what he does with that for you because I think that that's going to be amazing.
Yes, I'm excited too. And, it's turning my story into his story. And, that's what it's all about is, getting people to know God. So, through my bad experience, just like you and so many others, are helping people overcome their shame and guilt and leading them to God, really. I mean, making it about him, not so much about me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so good. So good. I love that so much. So what I would love to do is just really pray over you and that's how we can end our time together today is just I would really love to pray over you and your healing and what God has next for you. And then I will send you an email with a recap and it will have a link to a Google Drive folder that will have this recording and all of the notes that AI is taking right now. And then, just some homework that you can do if you want to. But
Absolutely.
obviously, you do whatever you feel you have the capacity for and whatever you feel is going to be helpful for you. And then I would really love to stay in touch with you and just kind of see what God is doing in your life.
Love that. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, I'll say a prayer and then I'll let you back to your day.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, friends, that was so much fun. And I know that fun probably isn't the greatest word to use to describe this coaching thing because there's going to be tears. There's going to be hard things that we talk about. There's going to be sometimes where it really does not feel fun, but I loved that particular session, and I just feel like that was such a great one to have on the show because that particular client was really super honest with me. And it's also a great thing for you to see how some of these things that she's doing can kind of work together with coaching. And so I hope you really enjoyed getting that kind of inside look. If you did enjoy that and you want that for yourself, remember that you can get just over 20% off of my coaching offer right now until Friday, May 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. All you have to do is go right now to brittanypoppy.com/May sale. And you can get your spot secured for that just over 20% off price. There's no codes needed. It'll automatically populate that price for you. And we will get started together. And Jesus is going to come in and he is going to heal your heart. All you have to do is surrender this to him. And so I hope that regardless of where you're at, that listening to this has inspired you and motivated you to find accountability in your healing journey. So whether that's through this coaching opportunity or whether that's through something else, you guys, I pray that you take that next right step in obedience, because I firmly believe that God has that for you. He has that for you somewhere in some way, and you do not have to do it alone. So please do it. Please find the healing that he has for you. It's so beautiful. It's so valuable. It's so freeing. Like, it's just so amazing to be able to walk in freedom with him. So if you would like to go through that with me, just one last reminder, it's brittanypoppy.com/May sale. The link is in the show notes as well. And you can get signed up with me. But regardless, I'm just praying that you find healing for your heart and wholeness and redemption from your past decision of abortion. So I can't wait to see you for the next episode. And we'll be back next week for that. But thank you so much for tuning in today. And I cannot wait to see what God does with your story. Hey, beautiful friend. I hope that you found comfort from today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave a written review in Apple Podcast or a starred review wherever you're listening? It truly encourages me to know that this podcast is helping you. Also, if you're looking for more support from other women who have walked the same walk as you, please join us in our free Facebook community, Abortion Recovery for Christian Women. Please know that I pray for you daily and I am here for you. I'll meet you back in a few days for another episode, but until then, take care and God bless.